Morning light spilled across the horizon as Tobias and Raphael stepped beyond the gates of Nineveh. The air was crisp, carrying with it the scent of dust and distance. Each step away from home felt both freeing and uncertain, for Tobias had never traveled so far. His heart wrestled between courage and fear, between faith and hesitation. Raphael walked beside him with a calm rhythm, his pace neither hurried nor slow, as if he already knew that the road itself was not merely a route towards silver, but a passage through which divine lessons would unfold. Mountains stood faintly in the distance, and the river's voice echoed softly like a whisper of destiny, guiding their feet forward. Tobias found comfort in the presence of his companion, whose words carried quiet wisdom. Along the road, Raphael spoke of trust, not the kind built upon clear sight, but the kind that endures when the way ahead is clouded. He explained that faith grows when certainty fades, and that guidance often arrives one step at a time rather than in grand revelation. His voice seemed to reach beyond mere conversation, touching something deep within Tobias' spirit. The young man began to sense that his journey was being shaped by more than mere coincidence, though he could not name the source of that assurance. As days stretched into weeks, the travelers faced both beauty and hardship. Roads were uneven, rivers treacherous, and nights cold beneath the stars. Yet Raphael's calm never wavered. When fatigue weighed upon Tobias, the stranger encouraged him with words that stirred his heart to keep walking. Every obstacle became a lesson, every difficulty a test of trust. Though Tobias did not yet recognize the divine hand guiding him, he began to walk with a growing confidence that something unseen watched over them. His steps became steadier, and his prayers, whispered under the night sky, grew more sincere. During one evening by the Tigris River, as moonlight shimmered across the water, Tobias bent to wash his feet. Without warning, a great fish leaped from the current and nearly swallowed his leg. Startled, he cried out, but Raphael commanded him to seize it. With trembling strength, Tobias caught the creature and dragged it ashore. Confused, he looked to his companion for explanation, and Raphael instructed him to preserve the heart, liver, and gall, for within them lay the power to heal and protect. Tobias obeyed without question, though the meaning remained hidden from him. That moment became a symbol of obedience born from faith rather than understanding, a truth that would soon shape the course of his destiny. Travel continued through plains and valleys, under sun and storm. Raphael's presence transformed weariness into learning. He spoke of virtue, of charity, of the quiet strength found in humility. Tobias listened, storing each word like treasure, unaware that he was being prepared for trials greater than distance or danger. His heart, once anxious, began to rest in quiet assurance. He had learned that faith is not the absence of fear, but the decision to walk forward despite it. One night, as they camped near a small village, Raphael told stories of God's hidden works throughout the generations, of unseen protection, of mercy disguised as misfortune. His words painted a picture of divine order woven through every event. Tobias felt both wonder and comfort, realizing that his father's teachings were echoes of the same truth now spoken by this mysterious traveler. Trust, he realized, was not something learned through ease, but through the steady endurance of each uncertain step. Each sunrise brought new challenges, yet Raphael never seemed surprised or alarmed. His awareness of the path ahead gave Tobias a sense of safety even when danger loomed. They crossed ravines, faced strangers with uncertain intentions, and endured long stretches of silence. But through it all, the young traveler began to sense purpose behind every moment. The unseen guidance that his father had spoken of now felt real, tangible, in the calm strength of his companion and in the quiet peace that began to settle in his own heart. Faith, once a lesson taught at home, had now become a living experience. Each trial on the road shaped Tobias' spirit, deepening his understanding of how heaven guides those who walk in obedience. As the mountains of Media began to rise in the distance, he no longer feared what awaited him. His trust had matured into confidence, and though he did not yet know the purpose behind the strange instructions about the fish, he believed that divine wisdom never gives command without meaning. With Raphael by his side, he walked forward into the unknown, carried by faith rather than sight. Roads winding through distant valleys often bring not only physical challenges, but the quiet battles that unfold within the heart. As Tobias continued his journey, guided by Raphael's steady counsel, he began to face the inner weight of doubt and fear that clung to him like shadows. Though his companion seemed serene, Tobias' mind often returned to thoughts of his father's blindness, his mother's tears, and the fear that he might fail them. At night, beneath the flickering stars, questions filled his mind. Questions about divine justice, about why suffering visits the faithful, about whether prayers truly rise beyond the sky. Raphael sensed the turmoil within him and spoke gently, teaching that every journey of faith must pass through valleys of uncertainty. He explained that courage is not born in the absence of fear, but in the choice to keep believing when the heart trembles. His words penetrated Tobias' doubts, reminding him that every faithful soul must learn to fight the battles that no sword can win. The greatest victories, Raphael said, are not fought against armies or beasts, but against despair, pride, and unbelief. Days of travel became a mirror reflecting Tobias' inner condition. When the road seemed endless, frustration whispered that God had forgotten him. When storms rolled across the plains, fear tempted him to turn back. Yet Raphael's calm presence reminded him that every trial carries within it the opportunity for growth. Through hunger and hardship, Tobias discovered that faith matures through persistence, not comfort. Each struggle refined him, like gold tested in fire. One evening, as they rested near a rocky hillside, Raphael spoke of the unseen warfare that rages within every human soul, the battle between faith and doubt, humility and arrogance, hope and despair. He explained that divine guidance is never forced upon anyone. It must be accepted freely through trust. Tobias listened in silence, realizing that his journey was as much inward as outward. The road to Media was leading him not only to recover his father's treasure, but to discover the strength of his own spirit. Fear still visited him in moments of exhaustion, whispering lies about failure and loss. Yet Raphael taught him to respond with prayer instead of panic, gratitude instead of complaint. Each act of faith, however small, became a weapon against the darkness that sought to weaken him. The journey revealed that divine companionship transforms fear into understanding and weakness into resilience. Through these trials, Tobias' heart began to reflect the peace of the one walking beside him. Every night carried lessons that words could not fully express. Under the wide heavens, as the fire crackled softly, Tobias began to perceive that the silence of God was not absence, but presence too vast for noise. His faith no longer depended on immediate answers, but rested in quiet assurance that heaven's wisdom often hides behind waiting. Through stillness, he learned patience. Through hardship, he learned humility. Raphael's guidance drew him deeper into reflection. He spoke not only of courage, but of purity, compassion, and obedience. He reminded Tobias that strength of soul comes from aligning the heart with the divine will. True freedom, Raphael said, is found not in control, but in surrender to God's plan. These words settled deeply within Tobias, preparing him for the unseen challenges that lay ahead in Ecbatana, where his destiny would soon meet another's sorrow. As they neared their destination, the air grew colder, and anticipation stirred within Tobias' chest. He did not yet understand the full reason for his journey, but the battle within him had already changed him. The doubts that once clouded his mind had given way to faith that glowed steady and strong. He had learned to trust not in certainty, but in companionship, the companionship of heaven walking beside him in human form. Arrival in Ecbatana marked a turning point that neither Tobias nor Raphael could outwardly reveal. The city rose against the horizon like a memory of forgotten beauty, its walls gleaming under the afternoon sun. Raphael led his companion to the home of Raguel, a man of honor and hospitality. Within those walls lived Sarah, whose sorrow had filled the heavens with prayer. Tobias entered unaware of her story, yet destiny had already bound their paths through divine purpose. What began as a simple act of obedience was about to become the fulfillment of two prayers long carried by angels. Raphael, ever discerning, perceived the divine plan unfolding. He spoke privately with Tobias, telling him of Sarah's plight and the evil spirit that had taken the lives of her suitors. He instructed Tobias not to fear, for God had chosen him to break that curse. The words startled the young traveler, yet Raphael's calm assurance gave him courage. He reminded Tobias of the fish taken from the river, explaining that its heart and liver held the means to drive away the demon. Tobias listened in awe, realizing that the strange command given earlier had not been random, but preparation for this very moment. That evening, Raguel welcomed the travelers warmly, offering food and comfort. Raphael, still known only as Azarias, spoke words of peace that filled the house with calm. When Raguel looked upon Tobias, he saw a noble spirit, and when Sarah's eyes met his, something within her stirred, a quiet recognition, as if her soul sensed that hope had finally arrived. The shadow of fear still lingered, yet faith began to whisper that heaven had not forgotten her after all. Raphael guided each step with precision. He instructed Tobias to take Sarah as his wife, reassuring both families that this union was blessed by heaven. Raguel hesitated, knowing the sorrow that had haunted his daughter, but faith overcame fear. A covenant was made, prayers were spoken, and Tobias' hands trembled as he took Sarah's in his. That night, as they entered their chamber, he remembered Raphael's words. With reverence and prayer, he burned the heart and liver of the fish, and as the smoke rose, the dark presence fled from the room, vanquished by faith and obedience. Peace filled the air where fear once reigned. Sarah's heart, long imprisoned by grief, found freedom in love, sanctified by trust. Tobias prayed with her before they slept, giving thanks to the God who delivers through humility. That night marked not only their union, but the triumph of divine mercy over evil's curse. Raphael, unseen by those rejoicing, stood near, watching the fulfillment of heaven's plan with quiet satisfaction. Morning brought tears of joy to Raguel and his household. The long shadow that had haunted them was gone. Sarah's father, overwhelmed with gratitude, blessed Tobias and praised God for restoring his daughter's honor. Feast and celebration filled the home, yet within Tobias' heart, a deeper peace bloomed. The realization that obedience to divine instruction always leads to deliverance. What began as a journey for silver had become a journey for redemption. Raphael continued to speak wisdom to the newlyweds, teaching them to remain steadfast in faith, to remember that every victory belongs to God, and that love purified by faith becomes an instrument of grace. His words carried the fragrance of eternity, though he still wore the appearance of a humble traveler. Days of joy followed, and Tobias prepared to return to his father with Sarah beside him. Two hearts, once burdened by pain, were now joined in divine purpose. The road home awaited them, yet neither could have imagined that the greatest miracle was still ahead, the restoration of sight, the revelation of truth, and the completion of Raphael's sacred mission. Return to Nineveh began with hearts full of gratitude and minds still reeling from all that had occurred in Ecbatana. Tobias and Sarah traveled beside Raphael, whose quiet presence remained their anchor. The road that once felt heavy with uncertainty now seemed bright with purpose. Their steps echoed with joy, yet behind that joy lingered a deep humility, for both had witnessed how swiftly despair can transform into hope when heaven intervenes. The long journey home was filled with reflection, of prayers answered, lives restored, and mysteries yet to be revealed. Raphael, still hidden behind his disguise, guided them with unwavering gentleness, each mile bringing them closer to a moment that would unveil the full splendor of divine compassion. Tobias carried with him the fish's gall, safeguarded as Raphael had instructed, though he still did not comprehend the full reason for it. Every evening by the campfire, he would glance toward his companion and wonder about the depth of his wisdom, the calm that never faltered, and the sense of light that seemed to follow him even in darkness. Sarah shared in this awe, her heart filled with gratitude for the man who had helped deliver her from bondage. Both sensed that Raphael was no ordinary traveler, yet they dared not speak their suspicions aloud, for reverence held them silent. His presence seemed to draw heaven near without a word. As the familiar fields near Nineveh came into view, anticipation mingled with nervousness. Tobias longed to embrace his father, yet feared what he might find. Time and distance had deepened his appreciation for Tobit's endurance, and he prayed fervently that his father still lived. When they reached the outskirts of the city, Raphael turned to Tobias and reminded him of the purpose for which the gall had been kept. He spoke softly, instructing him to anoint his father's eyes with it, promising that faith would do the rest. Tobias nodded, trusting completely, though the act itself seemed strange. Within the modest home where prayer had once been mixed with tears, Anna waited by the doorway, her eyes searching the horizon as she had done countless times before. The moment she saw her son approaching, she ran to meet him, her voice breaking with joy. Tobit, hearing the commotion, called out from within, his heart trembling between hope and disbelief. Guided by Sarah and Raphael, Tobias knelt beside his father, lifted the vial of gall, and gently touched it to the sightless eyes that had long known only darkness. Moments passed in stillness. Then, as Tobit blinked against the sting of the ointment, light began to pierce through the veil of blindness. He gasped, his hands rising to his face, as vision returned like dawn after endless night. The first thing he beheld was the face of his son, radiant with love, and beside him the woman whom heaven had given as both companion and miracle. Tears flowed freely, yet they were no longer tears of sorrow but of overflowing gratitude. His voice broke as he lifted his hands in praise, proclaiming the goodness of God, who restores what the world believes lost forever. Neighbors gathered, drawn by the sound of rejoicing. They marveled at the restoration of the man who had long been blind, and at the peace shining upon the young travelers. Yet none understood the depth of what had taken place, how the threads of two families' suffering had been woven into a single tapestry of divine mercy. Tobit's faith, tested through blindness, now stood as testimony that heaven's silence is never absence, only preparation for a greater revelation. Raphael stood quietly as praise filled the house. He watched the family embrace, listened to their words of thanksgiving, and knew that the moment of truth was near. His mission had reached its culmination, yet the revelation of who he was could not be rushed. When the joy had settled into calm, he called them together. His voice, serene yet commanding, filled the room with reverent silence. He began to speak words that carried the weight of eternity, explaining that he had been sent by God to heal Tobit, to unite Tobias and Sarah, and to show that heaven never abandons the faithful. A light not of this world seemed to surround him as he revealed his true nature. The humble traveler named Azarias became radiant, his countenance reflecting celestial brilliance. The family fell to the ground in awe and fear, realizing they had been walking beside an angel. Raphael's voice grew gentle again, urging them not to be afraid. reminding them that divine messengers come not for glory, but to serve. He spoke of God's mercy, of prayers heard and faith rewarded, and of the unseen ways heaven moves among humankind. Every heart in that room bowed before the majesty of what had been unveiled. Tobit, weeping with reverence, lifted his voice in blessing, acknowledging that no act of righteousness is ever forgotten, and that every trial holds the seed of divine grace. Raphael's mission had accomplished its purpose: healing, deliverance, and revelation, yet his message lingered beyond his departure, echoing in their hearts long after the light faded. Tobias, Sarah, and Tobit understood then that their lives had been touched not only by an angel, but by the hand of the eternal God, working quietly through love, obedience, and faith. Radiance that filled Tobit's home slowly faded into the calm glow of peace, leaving behind a stillness unlike any they had known. Raphael, no longer veiled by human form, spoke once more, his words flowing with the clarity of eternal truth. He reminded them that all he had done, every step, every word, every act, had been guided by the will of God alone. Nothing in their journey had been accidental. Every difficulty had been allowed to bring forth transformation. His presence had not come to display divine power, but to reveal divine purpose, that heaven's work continues quietly through obedience and faith, even when unseen. Tobit, still overwhelmed by wonder, listened as Raphael explained that he belonged to the 7 angels who stand before the throne of God, ever ready to carry out divine missions. He spoke of the harmony between heaven and earth, how human prayers rise like incense, and how each sincere cry moves the heart of the Almighty. Tobit's suffering, Sarah's sorrow, Tobias' courage, each had played a role in the unfolding of mercy. The angel's words revealed that no moment of faith is forgotten, and no act of love goes unnoticed in the eternal order. Raphael urged them to continue walking in righteousness, to give thanks daily, and to remember that humility is the pathway to divine favor. He spoke of almsgiving, prayer, and the purity of intention, teaching that these virtues align the human heart with heaven's rhythm. His voice, though soft, carried the strength of command, imprinting truth upon their souls. Tobias and Sarah bowed their heads, aware that they had been witnesses to a mystery far beyond human reason. Tobit's heart swelled with reverence as he promised to proclaim the goodness of God wherever his voice could be heard. When Raphael had finished his charge, he smiled, a gesture filled with both compassion and majesty. His radiance lifted higher, the glow surrounding him brightening until it seemed to merge with light itself. The family watched, their eyes filled with both awe and sorrow, for they knew the time had come for their heavenly companion to return to his realm. Without struggle or sound, he ascended, leaving behind only peace, a peace that lingered long after the vision faded from sight. The house that once echoed with lamentation now overflowed with thanksgiving. Tobit offered sacrifices of praise. His restored eyes filled with tears of gratitude. He spoke to all who would listen, telling them of the angel sent from heaven, of the faithfulness of God, and of the power of prayer. Neighbors who had doubted him before now gathered to hear his testimony, their hearts moved by the story of divine compassion hidden in ordinary life. His words became a song of deliverance, echoing through the streets of Nineveh. Life in Tobit's household was transformed. Tobias and Sarah continued to honor their parents, building their home upon faith and gratitude. Their marriage, born out of trial and sanctified by divine mercy, became a symbol of how love rooted in righteousness endures beyond fear. Each day they remembered Raphael's guidance, living with humility and generosity toward others. Their actions carried forward the same spirit that had once walked beside them in human form, the spirit of service, trust, and divine presence. Raphael's mission on earth had ended, but the impact of his presence remained like fragrance after the rain. Tobit's restored vision became not only a physical healing, but a spiritual awakening. He saw life differently, perceiving how every sorrow hides a blessing yet to be revealed. His blindness had been the soil from which deeper understanding grew, and his healing became the testimony through which many came to believe that God's messengers still walk among the faithful. Even as years passed, the memory of Raphael's words remained sharp in their hearts. Whenever doubt threatened, they remembered how heaven had entered their home quietly, without heralds or splendor, transforming darkness into light. The miracle taught them that divine assistance is not rare but constant, present in every act of kindness, every whisper of prayer, every moment of courage born from trust. Their story spread beyond Nineveh, reminding all who heard it that faith opens doors no human hand can unlock, and that angels still labor unseen to fulfill the work of heaven upon the earth. Stories of divine intervention often fade with time, yet the message within the Book of Tobit continues to shine with timeless power. Across the centuries, the tale of Raphael's hidden mission reminds humanity that heaven's work did not cease with ancient days. Every act of faith, every humble prayer, every tear offered in sincerity still reaches beyond the visible world. Angels may no longer reveal themselves in radiant splendor, yet they move quietly through the moments of daily life, guiding, protecting, and comforting in ways the human heart can barely comprehend. Raphael's journey was not a singular event confined to the past. It remains a living truth that echoes through every generation seeking hope amid despair. Faith teaches that divine presence often appears in unexpected forms. A stranger offering kindness, a word spoken at the right moment, a hand extended in compassion. These may be the very instruments through which heaven still touches the earth. The story of Raphael invites reflection upon how many times unseen guidance has directed the course of life, how many dangers were averted by what seemed coincidence, and how many prayers found their answer in silence. Those who learn to see beyond appearances begin to recognize that the world is filled with subtle traces of divine care. Every moment carries the potential for sacred encounter. Tobit's blindness, Sarah's sorrow, and Tobias' journey each became doorways through which God's mercy entered human experience. Their stories reveal that suffering is not punishment but invitation, an opening through which faith grows strong enough to perceive what the eyes cannot. When life seems dark and prayers appear unanswered, the lesson of Raphael reminds the soul to wait with trust, for heaven's timing never fails. Divine help may already be walking beside the weary traveler, disguised as an ordinary companion. The message carried by Raphael transcends the boundary between ancient scripture and modern life. It speaks to those who endure loss, to hearts burdened by uncertainty, to anyone who wonders whether their prayers still reach heaven. It whispers that no act of devotion is wasted, no cry unheard. God still commands his messengers to move among humanity, to bring healing, to guide, and to strengthen. Though unseen, their presence shapes the course of destiny, their influence felt in the quiet miracles that sustain faith in a restless world. Each act of kindness becomes an echo of Raphael's mission. When mercy is shown to the suffering, when forgiveness replaces bitterness, when hope is shared with those who have forgotten how to believe, the same divine spirit that guided Tobias lives again through human hands. Heaven continues its work through hearts willing to serve without recognition, through love that expects nothing in return. Such deeds may appear small, yet they carry eternal weight, forming the living bridge between the human and the divine. The power of this story rests not in spectacle but in transformation. Raphael's journey reveals that true miracles occur when hearts are changed, when fear gives way to faith, when despair yields to gratitude. The angel's departure did not mark the end of God's involvement, but the continuation of it through those who choose to walk in his ways. Every generation inherits the same invitation to live with eyes open to wonder, to listen for the soft movements of grace within ordinary days, and to trust that heaven is never far away. Faith calls each soul to awareness. The unseen realm does not exist apart from life, but flows through it like light through glass, invisible yet ever present. The trials faced by Tobit and his family illustrate that God's guidance is not reserved for saints or prophets, but offered to every person willing to believe. In every home, on every journey, in every act of courage, the quiet rhythm of divine purpose continues. Raphael's mission stands as proof that the Almighty delights in revealing glory through humility, power through gentleness, and eternity through love. Those who hear this story are invited to look upon their own lives with new eyes, to see the unseen, to remember that no step of faith goes unnoticed. The hand of heaven may be guiding each decision, each encounter, each moment of stillness where the soul reaches upward in hope. Raphael's mission reminds that angels still walk among humankind, clothed not in light, but in the simplicity of human kindness, carrying the same eternal message of healing and compassion that first shone in the house of Tobit. If this story has touched your heart and reminded you that faith still moves through the unseen, take a moment to share that light with others. Subscribe to the channel to continue exploring the hidden wonders of Scripture and the timeless lessons of divine truth. Like this video, to help its message reach those who may need encouragement today. Leave a comment below to share your thoughts or experiences of how faith has guided you in unexpected ways, and spread this story to friends and family who could use a reminder that heaven still walks beside us. Your voice, your faith, and your kindness keep this message alive for others seeking hope in their own journey. Every story that endures through time begins with a spark of divine mystery, and the story of Tobit carries one of the most profound. It speaks of faith tested through darkness, of prayers whispered in exile, and of heaven's hand quietly shaping human destiny. Long before angels were seen as symbols of comfort, one walked unnoticed among men, sent not to display power, but to heal, to guide, and to restore. This is not just an ancient tale. It is a reminder that unseen forces still move through our world, answering prayers in ways that eyes cannot see. Those who listen to this story step into a sacred rhythm where every hardship, every delay, and every act of trust becomes part of heaven's design. Life for Tobit unfolded far from the land of promise, in a city that did not honor the God of Israel. Yet, even in that foreign place, surrounded by idolatry and injustice, his heart remained steadfast. He gave to the poor, buried the dead, and lived by the commandments of his fathers, believing that obedience mattered more than comfort. To his neighbors he appeared only as a good man, kind, disciplined, faithful, but to heaven he was a vessel through whom grace would flow. His ordinary actions, unseen by the world, were preparing the ground for an extraordinary mission that would one day reveal just how close heaven walks beside those who remain faithful. Faith often shines brightest in moments when everything seems lost. When blindness later struck Tobit, the light within him was tested as never before. His world grew dark, yet his trust in God did not fade. He continued to pray, continued to bless, continued to believe that nothing escapes divine notice. His suffering was not punishment, but preparation, an invitation to experience God's providence in a way that sight alone could never reveal. This unseen shaping of the soul is where divine work begins, quiet and patient, weaving meaning into pain. Behind every visible struggle lies a mystery far greater than human understanding. What looks like coincidence is often careful orchestration. The story of Tobit invites reflection on how many times deliverance comes disguised as difficulty. It asks whether angels might already be near, clothed in ordinary faces, speaking words that seem casual but are guided by eternity. Heaven's hand moves in silence, not with thunder or display, but through the gentle turn of events that align perfectly when faith endures. Each generation reads this story differently, yet its truth remains unshaken. Tobit's life proves that God's plans are not hindered by distance, blindness, or time. His faith set in motion a chain of miracles that would reach far beyond his household, touching hearts still waiting for hope. And though centuries have passed, the same unseen care continues to guide all who choose to believe. The story begins in exile, in weariness, in unanswered prayer, but soon it will reveal the angel sent to heal, to protect, and to remind the world that no one who trusts heaven is ever truly alone. If this message inspires you and you wish to hear more stories of faith, divine mystery, and unseen grace, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps these timeless truths reach more hearts searching for light in their own journeys. Life in exile had never been kind to Tobit, yet his faith endured like a lamp in the cold wind of foreign lands. His days once flowed with purpose as he served others and kept the law of his fathers, but the weight of misfortune pressed heavily upon him when blindness struck without warning. While performing a simple act of kindness, burying one of his own people slain unjustly, he returned home weary and fell asleep against the courtyard wall. A sparrow's droppings fell into his open eyes, and within days his vision failed. What seemed a small mischance became a long season of darkness, one that stripped away his livelihood, his confidence, and nearly his hope. Yet within that loss, the fire of belief continued to burn quietly. His hands could no longer guide him through his home, but his heart remained guided by prayer. Blindness did not only rob Tobit of sight, it tested the limits of his patience and humility. Once known for his generosity, he now depended on the care of others. His wife, Anna, bore the burden of labor to sustain them, weaving cloth to earn what little they could. Each day, she went out with steady determination, her faith worn but unbroken, her heart aching for the husband who could no longer see her face. Tobit's spirit wrestled between gratitude and despair. The man who had once comforted others now questioned whether heaven still looked upon him. Yet even as he cried out in frustration, he never turned to bitterness. Instead, he confessed his sorrow to God, pleading not for wealth or comfort, but for understanding. Faith revealed its truest strength when every visible reason for hope had vanished. Tobit's blindness became not only a physical affliction, but a spiritual crucible in which the metal of his soul was refined. In the silence of his suffering, he began to perceive that devotion was not proven by ease, but by endurance. He prayed that if his life had reached its appointed measure, heaven would grant him peace and rest from his burdens. His prayer rose like incense from a broken heart, carried upward with the weight of generations who had also waited for deliverance. Yet unseen by him, that very prayer began to stir a divine response far beyond his imagination. Within the same world of exile and grief, in a distant land, another cry was rising to heaven, a cry that would one day intertwine with his own. But before those threads met, Tobit's household faced the ordinary trials that every faithful heart must endure. His son, Tobias, watched his father's pain with deep sorrow and confusion. Youthful energy urged him to act, to fix what could not be fixed. He had heard of his father's former deeds, the kindness shown to others, the courage to defy injustice, and now he saw that same man humbled by blindness. In that struggle, Tobias' understanding of faith began to mature. He realized that righteousness does not guarantee an easy life. It guarantees that one's life will bear meaning, even through hardship. Each evening, as the oil lamp flickered weakly in their small home, Tobit and his family gathered in prayer. Anna's voice trembled as she spoke of gratitude despite their need, and Tobias listened to his father speak words of hope, though his eyes could no longer see light. Through their prayers, the walls of exile seemed to fade for a moment, replaced by the unseen nearness of God. Tobit taught his son that obedience mattered most when no reward appeared in sight. He reminded him that faith must walk when sight cannot. These lessons, spoken in the quiet darkness, would later become the foundation for Tobias' own journey into the unknown. Hardship did not end with blindness alone. Poverty pressed against their door with quiet persistence. Neighbors who once respected Tobit now whispered about his misfortune, as if failure were a sign of divine displeasure. The injustice cut deeply, yet Tobit refused to curse heaven. Instead, he recalled the stories of the patriarchs, of Abraham's waiting, of Joseph's trials, of Job's endurance. Each tale reminded him that suffering had always been the crucible through which holiness was proven. He taught his family that divine purpose often hides beneath layers of difficulty, waiting for its time to unfold. As days stretched into months, Tobias began to carry more responsibility. Though young, he felt the weight of providing for his blind father and weary mother. He longed to do something that would restore dignity to their household, yet no opportunity presented itself. His prayers became quieter, more personal, shaped by a longing to see his father's joy restored. Deep within him, a quiet courage began to awaken, a courage that would soon be tested when destiny came knocking in a most unexpected way. Faith in that household did not rest upon miracles, but upon endurance. When everything visible had been stripped away, what remained was the invisible strength of trust. Tobit's suffering became a lesson written upon his son's heart, preparing him for a divine encounter still concealed beyond the horizon of his understanding. As night after night passed in darkness, both father and son held to the belief that heaven had not forgotten them, though no sign yet appeared to prove it. Far from Nineveh, in a city called Ecbatana, another soul wrestled with grief and despair. Her name was Sarah, daughter of Raguel, and her life was overshadowed by sorrow deeper than words could express. Though young and pure of heart, she had been bound by tragedy. Each time she was betrothed, death claimed her bridegroom before their union could be fulfilled. The shadow that followed her was no mere misfortune, but the torment of a demon that took the lives of those who sought her hand. Whispers spread through her household and beyond, accusing her of bringing death upon men, branding her cursed by heaven. Loneliness clung to her spirit, and the weight of shame crushed her will to live. Her days passed in silence and tears. Servants spoke behind closed doors, and her father's anxious eyes could offer little comfort. She withdrew into prayer, not with rehearsed words, but with the raw cry of a soul that could bear no more. In the quiet chamber where she sought refuge, she fell upon her knees and begged God for release from her suffering. Her heart poured out a plea for mercy, not for revenge against those who mocked her, but for an end to the unbearable pain of isolation. She believed her life had lost its purpose, that heaven had turned its face away. Yet as she wept, her prayer rose upward, carried by faith she barely understood. In another home, under a different sky, Tobit also prayed. His blindness and poverty had brought him to the edge of despair. Like Sarah, he no longer saw meaning in his suffering. His words, spoken through tears, were simple and sincere. He asked God to take his life, not out of rebellion, but from a place of exhaustion. His prayer, uttered in the stillness of the night, joined Sarah's lament across the distance between them. Two hearts, strangers to one another, cried out to the same heaven with the same longing, to be seen, to be heard, to be comforted. Heaven listened. While human ears cannot hear the harmony of such cries, the divine heart gathers them as one. In the unseen realm, the prayers of Tobit and Sarah rose together, merging into a single melody of sorrow and faith. The timing of their pain was no coincidence. It was the precise moment appointed for divine intervention. The same day their voices reached the throne of God, an angel was chosen to descend upon their path, a messenger whose mission would weave their destinies into one story of healing and restoration. Raphael, whose name means God heals, received the command to journey in disguise among the children of men. His mission would be both mercy and revelation, to guide, to protect, and to restore. Yet neither Tobit nor Sarah knew of this movement from heaven. To them, the world remained silent. To their eyes, nothing had changed. But faith does not depend on visible signs. It lives in the quiet conviction that when prayers rise sincerely, answers begin to move, even before they are seen. Sarah's father, Raguel, continued to comfort his daughter as best he could, yet she carried her sorrow inwardly. What she did not know was that her prayer had already altered the course of her life. Her despair had reached heaven, and mercy had begun its descent. The same was true for Tobit, who would soon discover that his longing for death would be answered not with release, but with renewal. Divine compassion does not always remove suffering immediately. It transforms it into the very means of deliverance. Unseen threads now stretched between two households miles apart. Tobias, unaware of Sarah's existence, would soon become the living link between them. The hand of heaven was preparing an encounter that neither family could predict. Through the unfolding of ordinary events, divine purpose would soon reveal itself, not through spectacle, but through the quiet arrival of an angel walking among men. When the heart reaches the depth of its sorrow, heaven often begins its work. Sarah's tears did not fall unnoticed, and Tobit's sigh did not fade unheard. From both cries, a single answer began to move, taking the shape of a journey that would unite despair and hope, loss and love, darkness and light. What seemed like two broken stories were about to become one divine narrative, touched by the presence of Raphael, who would walk the earth clothed in humility, carrying the healing of heaven in his steps. News soon reached Tobit that a trusted companion was needed for a distant journey. A deposit of silver left long ago with a man named Gabael in the region of Media awaited retrieval. Tobit, too weak and blind to travel, called for his son Tobias to undertake the mission. The journey would be long and uncertain, crossing rivers, mountains, and lands filled with danger. Tobias hesitated, unsure how to find the way or how to face the perils that might await him. His father's confidence, however, rested not on his son's strength, but on faith that heaven would guide him. Still, Tobit urged Tobias to seek a trustworthy companion for the road, a man who could lead him safely to Media and back again. One morning, as Tobias prepared to set out in search of such a companion, a stranger appeared near their home. He was dressed as a traveler, modest and composed, carrying himself with quiet assurance. His name, he said, was Azarias, son of the great Ananias. His voice carried calm wisdom, his eyes reflected peace, and his manner inspired trust. Tobias, sensing something sincere and noble about him, brought him before his father. Tobit, though blind, felt an instant sense of comfort in the man's words. Azarias spoke respectfully, answering every question with confidence, promising to guide the young traveler safely to his destination. Tobit, believing him to be a man sent by Providence, blessed their partnership and entrusted his son into his care. No one in that household knew that this gentle traveler was no ordinary man. Beneath the appearance of human form stood Raphael, an angel sent by God to fulfill a mission of mercy. His disguise was not deception, but protection, for divine messengers often walk among humanity veiled in simplicity so that hearts might respond in faith rather than fear. He walked with dust upon his feet and carried no sign of heavenly power. Yet every step he took carried divine purpose. Every word he spoke carried hidden light. Tobias, relieved to have found a companion, felt his anxiety fade. Together, they began to prepare for the journey. Anna, his mother, clung to her son with tears, fearing that she might never see him again. Her heart trembled at the thought of losing her only child, yet she submitted to the will of God. Tobit comforted her with words of trust, reminding her that those who walk in righteousness are never abandoned. Though sorrow lingered in the air, a quiet faith began to bloom again in that small home. Raphael's presence brought peace wherever he went. His manner carried an unspoken grace that calmed the troubled and encouraged the weary. He spoke to Tobias not only as a guide, but as a teacher, planting seeds of wisdom that would later blossom into understanding. His companionship was gentle yet firm, always steering Tobias toward faith in unseen guidance rather than reliance on human certainty. He did not reveal his true identity, for the beauty of divine work often lies in the mystery that invites trust without proof. Before they set out, Tobit called his son close and blessed him with trembling hands. He reminded him to honor God, to act with mercy, to give to the poor, and to walk in humility. His words flowed from years of devotion, forming a father's final instruction before parting. Tobias knelt, promising obedience, unaware that the journey ahead would not only reclaim silver, but also reshape his destiny. As he and Raphael stepped beyond the walls of Nineveh, the path ahead shimmered with unseen purpose. Many centuries later, believers would look upon this story as a lesson in recognizing divine presence hidden in ordinary forms. Angels, though radiant in their true nature, often choose to appear as travelers, strangers, or friends, so that hearts may learn to see God's hand, not in brilliance, but in the quiet rhythm of daily life. Raphael's approach reflected this truth perfectly. He did not come with wings unfurled or voice of thunder, but as a companion who offered help at the right moment. Faith begins to see what eyes cannot. Tobias, though unaware of the true identity of his companion, began to feel a growing assurance that his journey was protected. Raphael's calm words and steady presence shaped his courage. Together, they would soon walk the winding roads of faith and danger, yet at that moment, what mattered most was that they walked side by side. Divine mercy had entered human story, not through spectacle, but through a stranger's kindness.